Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another video. Happy Wednesday. Hope you guys are doing well. Midway through the week, you're all crushing it. However, it's time to talk about some footballers that are not crushing it so far this season. And it's a shame. It's a shame. A few of these were quite tough, to be honest. But as you can see by the title of this video, we're going to be ranking one player from every club who is underperforming this season. I sent out a tweet asking for your guys' suggestions at home about these players. And I'll be then putting them into a category as whether I think they are not coming back, or give them some time, give them a chance, and we'll see. So as you can see by the categories right here on screen, we've got 4 from he's amazing, where basically I think you're wrong, and that he is actually pretty good. Give them time, so they will be good, but just give them a little bit of time, they'll get there. Questions need to be asked, and no saving them. Those are the very special occasions where right now their career's kind of done and dusted, or at least where they are at the moment. It is a no-save situation. Now, I've done this in a random order as well, so you won't go alphabetical. Don't worry, Wolves fans. I know that does get annoying. But without further ado, let's kick it off. So let's kick things off with Bournemouth, which is actually quite a tough one, if we're being dead honest. I mean, Iriola's been doing an amazing job, and that entire Bournemouth squad's been fantastic. Even Evan Nilsson's really starting to come through now. But the one player who I thought is probably worth talking about is none other than Tyler Adams, who is a really interesting case, because a couple of years ago, well, literally 2 seasons ago, he was being linked to Chelsea, and then it didn't happen, the move, it fell through last minute, and he ended up going to Bournemouth. And he went to Bournemouth for a decent chunk of change in the end. I think it was a fee of around 25, I think might have been rising to 30 million possibly, and at the time, I really didn't mind it. I didn't mind it. Like, the same thing with Tyler Adams was, if he can stay fit, this is a good move. At least just to kind of improve the base squad level. And Iriola's done that fantastically. Like, he's improved every player's base level. But unfortunately for Tyler Adams, he did get injured. He had an injury. It kept him out for the majority of last season. I think he only played 3 games in the end. He's actually matched that so far this season. Again, not necessarily starting too many games, but making substitute appearances. He's appeared 3 times for Bournemouth already. But it's harsh. It's harsh because I actually think there is a good player there. Like, I'm not going to say he's a standout, lights above the rest midfielder in the Premier League, but he is pretty good. The issue, I think we're going to have to put him into questions need to be asked. I don't know if he's quite no saving just yet. He is only 25 years old. Maybe he's kind of another long-term injury away from basically saying, look, this is the player here. And a lot of money, like for Bournemouth, that is a lot of money to spend on a player. And so I think questions need to be asked around Tyler Adams. We'll see around this season. I think Iriola knows that. He's going to be quite careful about the game time he gives him. And so right now, I'm fine with that. On to Manchester City next. And wow, we're doing this just before the international break. So all the players have kind of gone to their national teams. And there's a few that I guess could have been at least spoken about. Phil Foden was a player who, well, he was the PFA Player of the Year last year, the Player of the Season. And at times he's not even starting for Manchester City this year. I mean, Pep does do that sometimes, normally with his centre-backs, but it does seem to be happening with Phil Foden, though he was in the team against Brighton that lost. Ederson this year seems to kind of fallen off a cliff, can't really keep a clean sheet, but maybe that's mainly due to the kind of defence in front of him. Haaland's obviously still top league goal scorer, so can't really criticise him if we're being honest. But the guy I do want to talk about is someone who pre the season starting, everyone was quite complimentary about the transfer. And it's still not a bad transfer by any means, but Ilkay Gundogan obviously was amazing at Barcelona last season, and then due to the financial reasons of wanting to register a player, moved to Manchester City on a free. And it's weird to say, like, give him time, and I don't really want to say, like, I'll put him in question, he's been asked now, but I'm not going to leave it there, I'll be honest. It's weird with Gundogan, because, like, I think the whole Man City team is just like a little bit off at the moment. And again, like when the new year rolls around, I'm sure they will kind of step into gear. But Gundogan, it felt like it was a guaranteed transfer. I remember actually saying that, like, a guaranteed transfers rarely happen in football. But it felt like Gundogan was one of them, a perfect transfer for them. However, he hasn't quite been up to the races. I am going to put him in give them time, just because right now, he still is a good, there is a good footballer in there. We saw that last year at Barcelona. I think things still need to be gelled a little bit around that Manchester City midfield in particular. With no Rodri, it is quite difficult for them. But he is definitely not the Ilkay Gundogan of last season, or the Ilkay Gundogan when he last represented Manchester City 2 seasons ago. And he's 34. Like, let's not be that surprised. There may be age is catching up with him now. Another possible suggestion would have been Kyle Walker as well, but I feel like it's kind of known that Walker isn't at the same level that he was operating at, and that's not really a shock. West Ham then, and if I was able to put a manager in there, then maybe it would have been West Ham's boss. I think though in this case, there are a couple of possible suggestions. Defensively, they've been very poor. Fulkrig obviously has been injured, not played barely at all, hasn't quite worked out up top for them as well. Patrick van Straten looking very smug, I think that's for sure. But Lucas Paqueta is the guy I want to talk about. Again, I'm going to go very quickly straight into questions need to be asked, because this was someone who was being quoted at £100 million to get his services last season. Obviously, since then, all this stuff has come out around the betting scandal. There is still the questions whether he'll be even able to play next season. And that is probably quite difficult to play your football when you've got all that noise surrounding you. I don't kind of disagree around that. But he has just not been the same player at all. I think at his best, Paqueta is a player that is a deeper lying midfielder, not necessarily a complete DM, but definitely more of a central midfielder rather than a 10. I think that's kind of what Lopetegui's been failing at more recently. He's operating much higher up the pitch. I think at his best, he's a little bit deeper. He can carry the ball forward. He's kind of got more of the pitch in front of him to play into. This year, him playing in this 10 role, I think just doesn't suit him. It really doesn't. We've seen a few of these West Ham players drop off this year. Even Kudus, who still has been pretty good, isn't at the level that he was operating last year. Bowen as well, someone who I feel like we've barely heard of so far this season, and normally he's always there for West Ham. But Paqueta in particular, I think is struggling playing this further up the pitch. I think if you drop him a little bit deeper, definitely obviously not asking him to do all the defensive work. I think that's the job of an Alvarez or a Souček. I think, though, you will then start to see the Paqueta of the past, where we were sitting there and thinking, wow, this guy can kind of do it all, because he can. Whereas at the 10 role, he's a little bit more limited, I think. So right now, questions need to be asked, but I think maybe that's of Lopetegui's use of him rather than the way he has been. He hasn't been great either, but I do think he gets better if you put him deeper. Okay, Wolverhampton Wanderers next, and your fourth, guys. You'll be a little bit happier today, hopefully. And I think really, it's a weird one with Wolves, because I think a lot of fans aren't too happy with the manager, and I still think O'Neill isn't that bad. I think he, on his day, can make the right decisions and be really smart with what he's doing. I think he's been a bit unfortunate with, again, I've mentioned it before about him not playing through at the back, and I think Wolves are better when they do that. But overall, I've got Jose Sarr here as their underperforming player. I also want to put Sam Johnson here as well. I think he's been really, really poor. And I'm going to put them in no saving them. This is a Wolves goalkeeping union, not just Jose Sarr. I know I've got his picture there. But they've been poor. They really have. I think Jose Sarr had one great game against Manchester City. They ended up losing that in the end. But Wolves were very good on that day. But the goalkeeping situation is killing them. Put it this way, right? Wolves' defence is still not been amazing, but their goalkeepers really are harming them. They have the worst goal record in the league. They've conceded the most with 27 goals. But actually, if you look at expected goals, they're at 21. That is a huge difference. That is a difference. If it continues at this kind of same pace for the rest of the season, that could be close to 15 or more goals conceded for the entire season, if not more, which, quite frankly, is what could take a team down. It's really, really letting them down. They've got the worst stats in the league in terms of goalkeepers for post-shot expected goals, which goals that they should be saving, or the average goalkeeper should be saving in the Premier League. And that's not just, as I said, not just between Jose Sarr. That is both goalkeepers here who are playing a part in this. And it's weird, right? Because this is a Jose Sarr who a couple of seasons ago was looked at as someone who was unbelievable, and maybe more than a couple of seasons ago, but had an outstanding season. Since then, dropped off a cliff, and it doesn't look like it's getting better anytime soon. He may have the odd game here or there where they might have a decent record, but for now, it doesn't look very good. Next up is Brighton, who again, like Bournemouth, very hard to criticise. They're just off the back of a 2-1 victory over Manchester City. And if there's one player who may be slightly underperforming, I think it's Mats Weifer. Again, really hard to criticise anyone from that Brighton squad, to be honest. Maybe Lewis Dunk could have possibly been a suggestion, but that's just because I think Igor and... he's been injured, and also I think Igor and Van Hecker have been pretty good so far this season. But I think with Mats Weifer... So many signings were brought in this summer. So many signings are starting, at least, as well this summer. And through the minutes that he's been given, he maybe doesn't look quite up to the grade of the other ones. But again, not a stick to beat him with, because the others have been playing unbelievably well. I think, if I'm being honest, I think he'll have to go in the give them time category just for a little bit, because yes, the error against Wolves was pretty bad. It definitely did not help them out, obviously, for a 2-2 draw in the end. And kind of since then, we've seen him kind of start on the bench and come on for maybe 10 or so minutes here or there. So maybe Herzler, again, is just going to give him a little bit more time to bed him in. Not every signing can start off so well and on fire. But give them time. I really think he could be a nice player. Like, he's still young. I think he does pretty nice things. He just made one silly error against Wolves that kind of cost him. To another team that are pretty hard to criticise, Aston Villa. They are definitely playing a little bit differently this year. I think Unai Emery's been a little bit more cautious. Obviously, they're playing in the Champions League as well, so he's got to kind of give minutes all over the pitch and make sure players aren't too injured. And in terms of like criticising or saying the most underperforming player, I don't think anyone's been absolutely terrible or been really poor. I think if we're looking at, say, like Matty Cash, for instance, has always been a position where I think maybe they could improve on. But I think he's been all right this year, to be honest. Like, he's not necessarily been terrible. But the one that Aston Villa fans sent to me was Leon Bailey. And I can kind of see why. Last season, Bailey was electric for Villa. He was quite frankly outrageous. Like, there were a lot of fantastic players for them, but Bailey did a very good job. Whether he was starting or coming off the bench, he always made an impact. 10 goals, 9 assists from last season is no mean feat whatsoever. 19 goal contributions. That's just in the league as well. But this year, he's only got 2 assists so far in the Premier League, which isn't terrible. But if you just watch the way he's playing, he's not the same. It's definitely not the same. And Aston Villa aren't playing the exact same as they were last year either. They have had to rely on a few kind of wonder strikes from John Duran in certain games, especially at the start of the season. Morgan Rogers has definitely taken a huge leap forward so far this campaign. Saw him obviously called up to the England team. But I kind of feel like this is a Leon Bailey maybe kind of reverting to form. Like, Leon Bailey so far in his career has only once got close to these numbers back in 2021, where he got 9 assists and 9 goals for Leverkusen. I think maybe questions do need to start to be asked. Like, this is just someone who is a kind of purple patch player, or purple patch season kind of player sometimes. When they're on it, they're on it. And when they're not, they can be quite stinky, which is what we're seeing so far this year. I don't think he is a player that needs to be given time. I just think this is what he is. There was a time he was being looked at as like a €100 million player, and I don't think it's that at all. I'm not saying Villa need to get rid or to kind of think about a future without him. If they got given a really good offer for him, I think definitely they should consider it. I'd maybe suggest that the Leon Bailey that you saw last season isn't someone you can rely on forever, and it's going to be a little bit like this. Not to compare him to another winger exactly, but Almiron, for instance, had that incredible season for Newcastle, and sometimes these players kind of get given this tag of, oh my god, they're that good, that's their standard, when actually their standard is here, and they just had a very, very good season. On to Chelsea now, and there's a few interesting suggestions here. Rob Sanchez was someone who was suggested as underperforming. Malo Gusto was someone as well that was suggested. But Enzo Fernandez, I think, is the most interesting talking point. The guy who's one of the most expensive players in the league, one of the most expensive players in the world, to be quite frank, especially for a midfielder. And I can understand why people are feeling like this. Firstly, he's not starting for Chelsea. Like, he costs over £100 million. He's not starting for Chelsea right now. It does seem like a midfield of Caicedo and Lavia. I do think it depends on the certain midfields that Chelsea are coming up against about who starts. And if you listen to Maresca, he definitely says that Enzo is kind of the one that's been really unfortunate recently not to start games. I thought against Arsenal, most recently, he was actually pretty good when he came on the pitch. The issue with someone like Enzo Fernandez is because he costs so much money and he's playing next to someone like Caicedo, everyone goes, okay, Caicedo's role is to win back the ball and get Chelsea up that pitch. That is his role, like to stop attacks and get them forward. Whereas Enzo's role is, if Caicedo's doing that, Enzo's role then must be contributing to the attack in some ways. Maybe it's the assist or a goal or whatever it might be. And sadly, that's how he's always going to be judged. He's never going to be judged for keeping the tempo ticking or playing long balls over the top or even getting like the pre-assists. one, those stats aren't like what people look at very often. And so that is the kind of role that he is playing in this Chelsea team. If you look at how it's going, like when it's Lavia and Caicedo, Lavia actually is a bit more of the deeper one, and it's Caicedo going a little bit further forward and winning the ball. Enzo isn't that physical. He isn't going to be winning the ball very often. He isn't going to be putting in these super tackles. He's much more about kind of playing these nice passes, keeping the game ticking over and progressing the attack. But when you cost the amount of money that you did, people aren't going to be quite happy for just doing that. And it's an interesting one because I'd love to put him in the give them time category, but he has had now nearly 2 full seasons. He's had a season and a half essentially, or coming up to 2 full seasons because he joined in the January. And so we have definitely seen moments where we think, wow, this guy is incredible. He can do it really well. Last season, he was playing with injury, and I think you could see that affect him at times as well. This season, it felt like it took him a little while to kind of get up to standard. If I'm taking I would love to put him and give them time. But if I'm taking my bias aside, I think maybe questions need to be asked, like, to be quite frank. I don't think there's a no saving them. I think there's definitely a future where he can be like the best midfielder for Chelsea. But we're going to have to start seeing it soon, I think. Otherwise people will be asking questions, if not already. So yeah, but again, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, not just about Enzo, but all of these players. And if I've not picked someone that you think should be there, let me know down there as well. To South London now, I'm going to talk about Crystal Palace. And there are a couple of people that could be mentioned here. A few of the centre-backs, Lasseau was kind of suggested, but I actually don't think their defence is too bad. I think Lasseau's actually okay. And they're definitely not the issue. Like Henderson was mentioned, and he's had a few errors this year, but I don't think he's the one that's super underperforming. Eddie Nketiah was also mentioned. I think he's had the most shots in the league without scoring a goal so far in the Prem. So there are definitely a few categories here, but I want to go with Kamada. Free transfer in the summer. I'm going to stick him into the questions need to be asked category because a free transfer is always hard to criticise, if we're being honest, but a free transfer in the summer. And I think he's someone that's suffering from kind of not having a role for him exactly in the team. He's been asked to play a few different positions in midfield, from attacking midfielder to central midfielder to defensive midfielder. And that midfield is finding it tough to gel. I mean, Adam Wharton's not been in the side basically through injury, or when he's been injured. Now he's out whilst recovering. We've seen like Will Hughes just not really at the standard anymore. And so like it's tough to then expect Kamada to come in and fix this issue. However, he's not really done a good job at least making it half decent. Defensively, he's not doing too much. Creatively, he's not doing too much. He's not necessarily helping out in that Palace midfield where they really do need it so far this season. There are definitely other positions, but I do understand why fans are finding it hard to gel with Kamada. I think he's finding it hard to gel with the team. Over to Leicester now, and their one is a pretty easy pick. Wout Faes. I'm not going to spend too long. I'm going to put him in the no saving them. He is struggling. Like, it's a very different kind of way he's being asked to play, much more of a defender rather than a kind of a ball-playing defender like he was last season under Maresca. The Championship, he actually looked pretty good. He could do the passing well, whereas in the Prem, it's not going well again. It really isn't. And I think they kind of maybe don't have to cut ties with him, but they do have to maybe think about a future without Wout Faes. They really do. He starts every game for him, and he's fine. He's fine, like, but you just know what level you're going to get from him. I don't really see a game where we're ever going to come out of it and go, Wout Faes was amazing today. And he was doing that last season under the way that they're playing. But Leicester are playing a completely different style of football now. And to be honest, even if he was still being asked to do that style of football in this league, he might still struggle. And so, yeah, I don't think there's any saving Wout Faes. Southampton this season knew that goals being scored would be a big issue for them. They've currently scored 7 so far in the league, the least of everybody in the entire table. I mean, even teams like who are around them, Leicester have 14, Ipswich have 12, Everton have 10, Wolves have 16. Their issue, though, is they are not taking their chances. Supposedly, according to XG, they should have 14 goals this season. So definitely, their forward line is maybe where they're underperforming. Cameron Archer, I actually think he's been pretty good. I do. I think clinically he's not been at the races. Obviously, that penalty miss against Man United, not great. But I still think back to the summer, they were like, okay, where are we going to need some help? up front, we're going to need goals. And they thought, who was like okay in the Premier League? Ben Berres and Diaz. And I think okay is a stretch. I really do. I was never a massive fan of him. And it's not to be too harsh, but I just don't think he's quite cut out for it. I'm putting him in the no saving them category. Ben Berres and Diaz hasn't scored for Southampton yet, and I don't know when he will, to be quite frank. You've seen Armstrong score before him, and I don't think Armstrong's been particularly amazing either, but Diaz was a really big call to bring in the summer. And look, I know it's hard because Southampton can't go out and spend 30, 40 million pounds on a striker to make sure they kind of fix the issue. But I just felt from seeing what we'd seen of Diaz already in the league, it was a rough call to make. Over to Manchester United now, and this is a interesting one because there are a few different positions. Obviously, they got a new manager coming in now. Agate was mentioned by a few fans. Xerxes was mentioned by a few fans. But the one that was mentioned loads, and I cannot get my head around this, like, I really can't. Garnacho. I know Garnacho has had games where he's a bit wasteful and he maybe makes the wrong decision, like Chelsea, for instance. But he's so young. He's 20 years old. And to be quite frank, he's amazing. I genuinely think Garnacho is one of the best young players in the league. I know he can make some rash decisions, but that for a youngster is normal. And also, like, they pay off quite often as well. Look at what happened most recently. He scored an unbelievable goal against Leicester on the weekend, and he didn't celebrate due to kind of the way fans are feeling about him and not feeling loved by his supporters. It was an amazing goal. And okay, he missed his chances against Chelsea. He maybe didn't make the right pass against Chelsea as well. But he'll learn from this. Not every 20-year-old can be what Cristiano Ronaldo was when he was at Manchester United. And I know that's the bar that they're going to set. But he is very, very, very good. He has more goals this season than the likes of Kylian Mbappe. I genuinely think he is a star and someone who will be around in the league for a long, long time. Or whatever league he is terrorising, I think he'll be one of the best players in that league. This is someone who has been playing now for a couple of seasons for United and done a pretty good job at it. Now, yes, well, maybe he's taken the minutes from someone like Amad Diallo, who has also been amazing when he's been on the pitch. I can understand why questions are being raised, but I think Garnacho is an incredible footballer. I genuinely do. And I can understand if people think he's selfish or whatever, but footballers are. Like, some of the best footballers in the world are selfish. And for every, like, who has the most shots in the league or misses the most big chances in the league? Erling Haaland. Who scores the most goals in the league? Erling Haaland. It's like, who misses the most passes in the league? Kevin De Bruyne. Who also is like normally the best passer of the ball in the league and gets the most assists? Kevin De Bruyne. Normally. Like, these things happen. And I just think people are getting on his back way too much. Newcastle United time. And I think it's time to talk a little bit about Tonali, who was the suggestion here. It's interesting with Tonali. Like, I think people forget about how much money was paid for him. And obviously, I know he's had the whole betting scandal and everything happen, and he's like served his time and he's back. But I don't think he's been like incredible, if I'm being totally honest. I think he's fine. I think the issue is what he does best. I think Bruno does to the same standard, if not better. Tonali isn't a 10. He's more of a 6. He's definitely deeper. But I just think Bruno's better at it. Like, I think you can play them both and put Bruno further up the pitch, where Bruno's also pretty good as well. But I think Bruno's an unreal 8 or 6, to be honest, too. I think basically you're sacrificing some of what Bruno's unbelievable at to have a Tonali there. And sometimes Tonali hasn't been quite at the races so far for Newcastle. I definitely think there is a player in there. I really do. I think he's definitely in the kind of give them time category. I just wonder how much time Newcastle will give him. Because at times, like, you look at what Elliot Anderson's doing for Forest. I know Newcastle beat Forest more recently. But that could have been an interesting midfield there with Joe Linton, Anderson and Bruno. And at times even Longstaff this season's kind of been outplaying Tonali. But give them time. Give Tonali the rest of the season. Let's actually see a full season of him for once, I guess, now that he's back. And then maybe at the end of the year, Newcastle fans can kind of make their opinion on him and go from there. Arsenal now, and it's an interesting one, this, because Trossard came up. However, I don't feel like Trossard is in Arsenal's best 11 if everybody is fit. I think a couple of people raised questions over Declan Rice so far this season, which I think are fine questions to ask. I don't think he's maybe been at the level he has been last year, but The one I wanted to talk about was Gabriel Martinelli. Scored against Chelsea on the weekend. And there's no doubt that there is a fantastic player in there. I think what he suffers from is him and Saka both kind of came through at the same time, right? And Saka, and there was that one season that Martinelli was amazing. And so was Saka. And Saka has kind of gone from there and gone leaps and bounds ahead. He's this, one of the best players in the league. Whereas Martinelli, had a poor season last year. Poor's a bit harsh to say, but like an average season last year. And again, hasn't really set the world alight so far this season. And Arsenal fans are thinking, look, if there are other left wingers out there in the world, like a Rafa Leao is there at AC Milan, possibly available so in the summer. We saw the links to Nico Williams in the summer as well, who's obviously a fantastic winger. And it's a position I think Arsenal fans are definitely thinking, maybe we can improve on this. Gabriel Martinelli is someone who did look incredible. He is still only 23 years old. Like, that's something that we have to realise. Sometimes, I mentioned this about Garnacho, but young footballers, and really until they're about 27, 26, 27, can go up and down like this. Like, it isn't normal to see these Lamine Yamals or these extremely other young players, like even Erling Haaland, to be honest, come through at such a young age and just dominate football like they do. Like, that isn't the norm. Martinelli at times looked like he was also part of that category. However, turns out he wasn't. I don't think he's bad, though, at all. I think give him time. Put him in that category. Like, one of the issues I think between amazing, like, it's not like he isn't deserving of the criticism so far, which is probably what puts him in this category and not he's amazing. He is somebody who, on his day, can be Arsenal's like best outlet if needed. However, he's not had his day for a little while now. And so I think for now, give him time, but he is a hell of a footballer. Another West London club that we need to talk about is Fulham. Again, very, very hard to criticise Fulham because they've been incredible. And maybe if you were looking at a few players, like the only one I could really come to give criticism to, or not even criticism, but was Sander Berg, who obviously they bought in the summer and at times hasn't really been in the squad. But partly that's because Lukic has been amazing. And so I don't really feel like he's deserving of maybe the underperforming category. But honestly, I had no idea what player to put in here. I'm just going to put Sander Berg and give him time. Like, I think when he has been on the pitch, he's been pretty good as well. I don't think he's amazing category is maybe there for him. I think he's just been misprofiled in terms of, like, I had no one else to put here. So he's going, give him time. He's absolutely fine, though. I've got no worries about Sander Berg. Nottingham Forest now, and again, a very tough team to talk about because they've been incredible. Awioni was someone I wanted to mention, but Chris Wood's just like the second or first best striker in the league at the moment. So again, hard to criticise him. James Ward-Prowse was someone that I basically wanted to mention. He's obviously there this season from West Ham. I don't think he's in the no saving them category. Well, because he has a job. And like, to be honest, like, Forest are just amazing. Like, there's no chance of getting in this team at the moment, apart from substitute appearances. But like, we know the level that Ward-Prowse is, and it wasn't really the level that they wanted him at West Ham. And so is he really the level for Forest? Maybe it's super harsh. I'll put him in questions need to be asked. I think it's harsh when you put him in the other category because he can on his day he can have an incredible game, and especially just from his set pieces alone means that he is worth saving because he's an asset on that front. Liverpool time, and you know what? Again, another third in a row of a tough team to talk about because they've been so good. But really, the only player that questions can be asked is Andrew Robertson. I think he does go in the questions need to be asked category. And it's just because Father Time has caught up with him. Like, he just doesn't have the pace anymore, and he doesn't maybe have the physical ability to deal with certain wingers or to bomb up the other wing and get the ball in the box. I think Slot is using him we've seen Simicast at times come in. He's done a pretty good job. But just to have that experience in that team as well is needed. I think Liverpool should look, if they can, in January at getting in a left back, if not definitely the summer. I thought Robertson at Fulham would have been a really good choice in the summer just gone. I'm surprised no one actually went for him in the end. But Robertson to replace Robertson would have been a pretty decent title for them as well. However, yeah, with Andrew Robertson, it's not that like, oh, he's an awful footballer or anything like that. He's just not performing at the levels that we know him to do, and probably what Liverpool need in order to compete for the title and keep going. Like, they are doing an incredible job right now, but if I think any manager was coming up against them, they would go target Andrew Robertson, like the right winger, be on him all the time, you'll skin him all the time. And so, yeah, not to be incredibly harsh, But it just is what it is. I think he's been unfortunate just because Father Time's caught up with him. From Liverpool back to London then to talk about Tottenham Hotspur, and from a left back to another left back, Destiny Udogie. Wow. What's happened? Genuinely, what has happened to Destiny Udogie? He has become completely different to what we see last year. Maybe it's now just because people know what Spurs are trying to do a lot more, how they want their fullbacks to operate. Maybe it's because of that. But Destiny Udogie last year looked like one of the best fullbacks in the league. And okay, maybe his defensive work wasn't amazing. It wasn't like incredible. But his attacking and going forward work was outrageous. It was genuinely fantastic last season, especially for the first half of the season. Now I'm not so sure, and I think Spurs fans are questioning it as well. He is super young, so again, I think I'm going to put him in the give them time category rather than the questions need to be asked, just because this is what can happen with youngsters, especially when maybe teams start targeting certain positions or trying to exploit a certain player's weakness, and it can take time for him to adapt and time for him to realise what he's doing wrong. But they don't necessarily have a great cover for him at left back. Like Ben Davies at times being used as a centre back rather than a left back, and so I do feel for him a little bit. I think just due to what we saw last year, it's way too early to maybe start asking questions. Just give him a little bit more time. Again, that whole Spurs team is so flaky and not to use the phrase, but so Spursy this season. But yeah, for now, we're sticking him and give them time. Let's blast through the next few then, because I think, to be quite honest, a few of them just go into the no saving them. Jack Harrison for Everton, no saving. He at times looked really good. He did. I think he looked very good for Leeds when they first came up. At times, Everton has scored some wonder goals. But even last year, we were sitting here and saying he's not really offering them much at all. He's obviously gone back to Everton, again, not offering much, if not playing as well. And so Everton could do, I think, a lot better than him now. If there's been rumours of him, as I said, going back to Leeds. And so I think for now, there's just no saving them. I think even Everton fans and Everton themselves know that he's just not the guy. Wes Burns is one of the players I want to talk about for Ipswich. Ipswich, again, I think are actually doing pretty well this season. I said it in my video on Monday. I think Wes Burns, though, at times has struggled. In terms of Ipswich's history, he's been, in the last couple of years, he's been amazing for them. He has. You've seen that happen as they've gone up the leagues. But he has definitely struggled this year so far in the Premier League. And a few players have. Welcome to the Premier League. You're in for a bit of a ride here. To be quite honest, it's a hell of a jump, man. You're going from, even in the Championship, where they were able to, in a decent amount of games, dominate the ball, have possession, to now coming to the Premier League, and you're up against the highest level of tactical managers who are getting their players to press to a level you've never seen before, and now being asked to kind of, at times, be held to the same level of expectation that you were doing previously in other leagues. I can understand why that's tough for him, to be quite honest. It's going to be tough for anybody who's come up the leagues like he has. I think it's incredibly harsh for me to say there's no saving them. The level that he's been operating at has had to improve year on year on year, and there's no saying that he can't improve as the season goes on. But I will put him in the questions need to be asked category. Ipswich, maybe they can think about somebody else. And finally, we're at Brentford to talk about Mads Roslev as maybe the underperforming player for them. Hope I got the pronunciation right there. I saw people say that he has been the worst player they've ever seen put on a shirt for Brentford. This is coming from Brentford fans. And that is quite a damning statement. It's mad. I mean, he had a really rough game. Against Fulham, if I remember correctly. And so he is still only 25. But he's just when they've got the injuries that they do to the fullbacks that they have, it is tough to replace them. And I think he's just maybe kind of been a little bit shocked. I'm going to stick him in the no saving them for now. And I'm going to take more of the Brentford fans' advice here, saying that he's the worst player they've ever seen. But to be honest, that's really the only Brentford you can say that player you can say that to, because a lot of the others have been absolutely amazing. Even Van den Berg, who they bought from Liverpool, has been really good when he's played. Maybe the only other criticism, Fabio Carvalho has not really featured that much. But apart from that, I think they've done pretty well, to be quite honest. But there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the list, as you can see, on screen right now. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Is there anyone I've missed out? Is there someone else who should have been suggested for your team? Let me know down there. Tough one to make, this list. And where would you put some of the other ones if you were to have them there as well? I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Click on screen right now for some more Zach Djellab content. I hope you guys are subscribed to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you guys on Friday for the podcast. Make sure you're there. We'll see you later. Bye.